Ever get that feeling? Like you're talking, but nobody's really listening.
Happens all the time, right?
It's like the background noise of the modern world. Everyone's so busy, so plugged in.
Exactly.
But you know what? Turns out there's a real art to listening, and it's not just about being polite.
Oh, absolutely not.
We're talking about making it your superpower, especially in the world of business.
That's right.
And for today's deep dive, we're going all in on this idea that listening, really listening, can be the key to unlocking better deals, forging stronger relationships, you name it.
It's true. I've seen it firsthand.
So how do we go from passive hearing to, like, weaponized listening?
Okay, well, first off, we got to ditch this idea that listening is passive. It's anything but.
No, you're right.
It takes effort. It takes presence. Because think about it. When someone really listens to you, really gets what you're saying.
It's a good feeling.
It is. And it instantly builds trust. You feel seen, you feel heard, and that changes the whole dynamic.
Exactly. And I think the source material we've been looking at really emphasizes this, right? Like they say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the power of feeling heard can completely transform a negotiation.
100%.
Yeah.
You go from opponents trying to score points to collaborators searching for a win-win.
Right. But here's the thing. How often do we actually do that? Really listen? I mean, it's so easy to fall into the trap of, like, waiting for your turn to talk or just, I don't know, nodding along while thinking about your grocery list.
Oh, all the time. And that's where things can go south.
Yeah.
Because you miss those subtle cues, the hesitation in their voice, the way they say a certain word. You miss the story behind the story.
And that's where those misunderstandings pop up, right? The missed opportunities.
Exactly. But here's the good news. It's a skill you can develop.
Okay, so how do we do it? How do we become better listeners?
Well, this piece we're looking at talks about the art of asking the right questions.
Right, because it's not as easy as it sounds.
Not at all. Anyone can ask a yes or no question. But to get to the heart of what someone's really thinking, feeling, you need to be more intentional.
So instead of saying, are you happy with the project timeline, it's more like, what are your thoughts on the proposed project timeline?
Exactly. Open-ended questions. Questions that invite them to share more than just a one-word answer. And then, once they do, that's where the real active listening comes in.
Because you're not just listening to the words, you're listening for the meaning behind them. You're paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language, the whole 9 yards.
Precisely. And here's another crucial tip from the source. Don't be afraid to go off script.
What do you mean?
Well, too often we go into conversations with a set list of questions. But real listening means being present, being adaptable. If something they say sparks your curiosity, ask about it, even if it wasn't on your original list.
So be genuinely curious.
Exactly. It's about being truly engaged in that moment, in that conversation.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it stops being a transaction and becomes a dialogue.
And I imagine that's where those really strong relationships are built, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it shows you're truly invested in them, in their perspective. And that pays dividends long after the deal is signed.
Speaking of which, the source also makes a great point about how this isn't just about, like, closing a sale, it's about nurturing those long-term client relationships.
Couldn't agree more. Because needs change, priorities shift.
Right.
And if you're not listening, you're not adapting. You're basically operating on outdated information.
It's like trying to navigate with a map from, like, 1998.
Exactly. You might get there eventually, but it's going to be a bumpy ride.
And you might miss some pretty awesome stuff along the way. But when you're actively listening, you're constantly updating your mental map. You're staying ahead of the curve.
That's right. And that's how you build that unshakable loyalty. Because you're showing them you're not just there for the sale, you're there for the long haul.
It reminds me of, you know, how Lego completely revamped their Lego Friends line based on feedback from girls.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. They listened to what their audience wanted, even though it meant changing course, and it ended up being a huge success.
Proof that sometimes the best thing you can do for your business, for any relationship really, is to simply listen.
So true. And on that note, as we wrap up our deep dive today, here's a little something to ponder. How can you apply this in your own life?
Yes.
Not just in the boardroom, but in your everyday interactions with your family, with your friends, with the barista making your coffee.
Because at the end of the day, we all just want to be heard, right?
Absolutely. It's a simple concept, but in practice, it's something we can all work on. So next time you find yourself in a conversation, big or small, I challenge you, really listen. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Words to live by.